And we're saying, well, how many of us is there? I mean, I've done a session, I've come across 5 other past lives, and now I've crossed over in the interlife and I'm in my soul energy. On the way through during a normal hypnotic regression, I've been my 7-year-old, my 12-year-old, everything along the way. I've done pre-birth while in the womb, 5 other lifetimes. Now I'm in the spiritual realm. I mean, how many more of us is there? Hard science is saying these things. And whilst they stop, that they don't realize that consciousness can transport to these other dimensions. I mean, our body can stay here, but our consciousness is mobile.
Welcome to this podcast. This is the beginning series of a number of videos where we're going to explore reality. And I want to welcome Pete Smith, who is a friend of mine. Pete is a consciousness researcher and author, which is how I encountered him. For the past 20 years, he's been traveling the world training consciousness facilitators to access other dimensions and realities. And he founded the Institute for Quantum Consciousness to bring science, spirituality, and consciousness within everyone's reach, which is beautiful, powerful work. Pete believes everyone should discover their magnificence firsthand. So thanks, Pete, for being here.
Well, it's great to be here, Mike. I'm so looking forward to these conversations that we're going to have in the next space of time. And I know that you're passionate like me about helping people discover that there's so much more to them. And this podcast is going to do all of that. But if I may, I'd like to do an official introduction of you as well, because it's great for these guys to know who you are. And this is Mike, and Mike's a facilitator of consciousness. And he's had more than 35 years exploration from hypnosis to NLP, many years of shamanism, alchemy, altered states. And he's now working with people to explore their greatness. Creating uplifting and inspiring journeys to reveal who you truly are beyond time and space. And he facilitates access to his clients' next steps and the ability to create that in the here and now. So if anyone was on the same page, Mike, I think you and I are.
Sounds like it, mate. So with the premise in mind, especially for this first one, of discovering that there is so much more to us than this third dimensional model of reality and this kind of, for want of cliche, this meat suit that we're wearing. How did you discover it?
Well, I think there's something that happened for me as a kid, and I think a lot of people will identify with this, in that weird stuff happens when you're a kid. And you wake up in bed and you're sort of looking down at your body, or, I remember a dream when I was sort of floating above the house one time and then jolted back into my body. And I guess from an early age, I was looking to find out the answer to the questions that no one could answer to me. I asked them at Sunday school and they kicked me out because for answering too many difficult questions. So for me, early teenage years, I was writing books on UFOs, on Bigfoot, the unexplained stuff, and that gradually took me forward to explore further. I did get trapped in corporate life for about 20 years in the banking industry, and I like to think of myself as a reformed banker now, having seen what happens in that industry. But even then, I started to explore, became a Reiki practitioner, then studied hypnotherapy, and I was running a hypnotherapy clinic and working in corporate life during the week, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I got out, and that's 20 years ago now. So I was doing both together at the same time, but the vibrational frequencies didn't match for some strange reason. So for me, it was exploring hypnotherapy. Then I found Michael Newton's work with the life between lives, because I really only studied hypnotherapy to become a past life regression person. I'd had my own sessions, which had blown my mind at that point. So I went through that, got involved with Michael over in America, worked with him for a long time until he passed away, continued with his organisation, still there now, of course. But along the way, I started to get enrolled in quantum physics. And the more I looked at quantum physics, the more I saw that, it starts to support spirituality. And I think consciousness is the glue that encapsulates all of it. And when you change, science and spirituality, when you just say consciousness, actually pull the two together, and there's no longer an overlap, but more of a merger.
Yeah.
So for me, you can't really explore consciousness without exploring your own. So without boring our people to tears too much, I've had a string of consciousness experiences that I would have a personal experience, I'd do research, personal experience, do research, personal experience, do research. And that led me down a path to really want to help other people understand what I'd found. And that's where we find ourselves today. And that's why I'm here. But your turn. Want to know about you, and how do you know, Mike, that there's so much more to us?
Yeah. Cool. Well, in terms of the history, I had a near-death experience when I was about 13. I was crossing the road, got run over, and that kind of shifted my awareness. In a way, lots of people who have near-death experiences, it's the minority that end up on YouTube and series like that. The majority, and there seems to be more and more, end up quite dysfunctional in a way in the world, because how do you go back into a world, especially at the age of 13, that is telling you that all of this is real and you have a sense that it's not? So what that meant for me as I began meditating at 14, not seriously, but then that just led me down that path of what is really going on here in the world. At about early 20s was playing with plant medicines, things like that, which my friends would go, oh, let's take some mushrooms and go to a party, and I couldn't, because I was totally dysfunctional at parties. But I was great if I went into nature. And that led me to giving all of that up, actually, changing countries. I went for a motorbike ride around Europe, and then I was in England at the time, and then just 6 weeks later, I went, I'm done, packed it all up, sold everything, went to Australia, where I was born. I felt the calling there. And met a shaman who, first of all, it was learning body work, so for postural release and also for karmic release. But he wanted to run a shamanic course with two partners that he'd been doing work with, and that was a 10-year apprenticeship. So that led me down the path, I guess, which I will probably mention later, but it led me down the path where it was no plant medicine, no rattles, no feathers, just you and your consciousness. And that sent me down all sorts of paths like NLP, hypnosis, the far more strange ways of looking at the world. But it's also led me down the path of really exploring who we are, and in doing so, finding these aspects of ourselves that cannot be explained through third-dimensional reality. The understandings, the wisdoms, it really opens that world to finding this aspect of us that cannot be explained by physics, cannot be explained by scientists, cannot be explained by religion. It is just there to be experienced, and that is all. And that's kind of how I ended up here. There was probably more stuff to be explored in that, and we will. But yeah, that's how I met you, Pete, is finding ways to go deeper.
Yeah.
Or further out. Yeah.
Birds of a feather. And I think it's great for people to know, Mike, that we did come from rather traditional backgrounds originally. And all we had was an open mind. And, that's how you find it. But I can only imagine what an NDE at 13 years of age did for you, and how that set you up for a career in consciousness.
Yeah, well, we've seen together that that's It was just a matter of time. And funnily enough, the shamanic training is very much the amount of times we've encountered people who've had a calling at a young age like that and ended up in that space is interesting.
Yeah, makes you wonder if our curriculum's right at high schools, doesn't it? Maybe we should be teaching out-of-body stuff to teenagers to fertilize their minds for the life ahead.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So I feel like it's interesting to also mention now the notion of how science, like, so quantum physics is interesting because we start to head into the realms of not knowing. Yeah. Like the average person goes, oh yeah, science worked it all out. But quantum physicists will go, no, we're just guessing. We've got theories. Yeah, so it's interesting. What was your pull toward that? How did that help you find your way?
Well, when I first studied with Michael Newton, and we were talking about the spiritual realm, and we're saying, well, how many of us is there? I mean, I've done a session, I've come across 5 other past lives, and now I've crossed over in the interlife, and I'm in my soul energy. On the way through during a normal hypnotic regression, I've been my 7-year-old, my 12-year-old, everything along the way. I've done pre-birth while in the womb, 5 other lifetimes. Now I'm in the spiritual realm. I mean, how many more of us is there? And I started to get involved in quantum physics because I was drawn to things like the many worlds interpretation.
Yeah.
You know, there was a guy that did a thesis on how the wave function doesn't collapse, but it keeps going into multiple realities when we make decision points. His name was Everett, and he published that work in 1957 as his thesis. Everyone thought he was nuts, but many years later, before he died, he was hailed a genius, and that's when science catches up to these trailblazers. So I've always felt that there was a natural multi-dimensional reality that we're part of. And whilst this reality may have Pete as its disguise, I feel these other worlds that are within reach. So we set out to find them. And it's like that old radio dial analogy that if you change the radio dial and you dial a different frequency, you get a different result. And we started to access some of these other cells through quantum entanglement, just to find out what was happening in other timelines. And once you, and that all fits perfectly with quantum physics. I mean, even string theory, where they talk about 11 different dimensions, 3 dimensions plus time is 4. I mean, the math says there's another 7. So what's in those other 7? I mean, this is science speaking. This isn't, Pete and Mike on a mushroom trip. This is about hard science is saying these things. And whilst they stop, that they don't realize that consciousness can transport to these other dimensions. I mean, our body can stay here, but our consciousness is mobile. And that's the beauty of this work, Mike. And that's what you've found in your journeys as well, I'm sure, with the shaman stuff. I mean, consciousness is transportable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting. I ask about the quantum physics because my take on it has been that physics is usually quite far behind those who are on the leading edge, right? Not to create any conflict or tension, but it often is, and the aspects. This is kind of what I was thinking about before. Is as you see this everywhere, right? At every level of science, is that they will try and go, this is how things are. This is how things are. And when things fall outside of what that map is, they will go, no, that's your imagination. That is illusion. You are nuts. Take this pill, right? But the shamanic perspective is that everything is possible. We live in an infinite universe, right? So what that means is when somebody comes with, and this is not directly my experience, but when somebody, for instance, came with feeling like they were possessed by demons, my teacher went, Interesting. So how does that fit in the map? And if it doesn't fit in the map, how do we add that to the map? Where would it sit? My experience has been in a very different direction, but it's the same model, right? It is, okay, I don't have a map for this. We're in uncharted territory. So it's kind of like the physics is the old school hippie dragons on the map, whereas the shamanic work, the consciousness work, is more like, okay, let's go sail in that direction and find what we find, right? And that's how we got, you know, the Indies and America and all of that, because we didn't know that they were there. Of course, they were there. Those people were living there, but that is the thing. It is just about expanding the map and going, where does this fit? And I'm not saying jump to instant conclusions, because that's not real either. Because we can get one thing and go, oh yeah, we need a map for that. But if you can go back there and explore it until you can go, yeah, I can see where this fits. And you naturally start to form pictures, and you can get your eraser out and rub the dragons out. Yeah, create ways for other people to get there.
And I think what personal experience does is it gives us a taste. And we're willing to, as you say, is to stretch the box. And I love that old analogy of the old explorers. And there was a saying that somebody used once: you can't discover new lands if you want to stay inside of the coast of the old ones. You've got to sort of get further away and let it drop out of your sight, and then see where you're drawn. And I love how it's the connection to nature, and everything that we do in spirituality has that connection to nature. And that's one thing I've always appreciated with shamanism, was the connection into the natural world. And what it means is the natural world, that beautiful, scenario of nature is that's the facade behind which there's an even deeper and richer world. And that's what I've loved about that, was the connection to the animal and plant kingdom that has brought that into people's line of sight. And, you and I are great examples, because we both once lived in Melbourne. We've been drawn to other areas in the countryside. We're both Queenslanders now, as people may know. But there's something about being drawn closer to the natural world so that we can explore the metaphysical. Because I think the metaphysical gateway is through nature and not through society as we've created it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think nature is a big factor, and that getting away from the energetic buzz of all of that electricity and grid work and all of that, which is not natural. And also for me, I find myself in a world, especially talking to you, right? I find myself in a world where I am constantly touched by this notion that everything that we experience is both true and not true, right? So it is true that you don't need to be in nature to do all of that. You could do it anywhere. And at the same time, of course, it's much more beautiful to be in nature. It's easier in nature. So that's my take on it. It's just we follow to those places. Yeah.
So what do you see us as offering people through this series of conversations we're going to do, Mike?
I think that we start to form a model for people who have not encountered this before, of how, this life, this body that we're in right now, it exists now. Yeah. And at the same time, this is where this thing of there being two realities in a way, it exists now, and yet it exists through all time and space. Now, all time and space, according to quantum physics, is only right now, and time is an illusion. So this is the thing. There's all of these interplays. But let me just say this. I think just forming a map of so far of reality as we understand it, and to invite people to just experience that, stretching the box a little bit bigger, wherever you are, just stretching a little bit bigger, and allowing that to do its work on them simply by contemplating what they could do to shift their awareness to this higher and higher state.
Yeah, I love that. I love that stretching of humanity. And I think that if all of us discover our magnificence, we start to explore it. First of all, we discover it, we show others the way as well. It's like we're all here as individual particles and we all become a wave. And there's a wave of awakening sweeping this planet. Old systems are falling away. Many of them are in distress. And that's because their day is done. And it's because this awakening that we came here to be part of, it's a deliberate incarnation into this, this place and this time zone. We came here to change the world. And I think it's conversations like this one that help people to know that and to know that they have a role to play in it. If we can help share some information that gives them that model of transcending the old and moving towards the new, then, I think that's going to bring us great fulfillment, Mike.
Love it. Love it.
So if I asked you a couple of questions, if I asked you to maybe give people 3 hints on where they can make a start, you've been doing executive coaching for a long time and bringing people through into their magnificence. So what would be the start point for some of our people that might be listening?
Yeah. So I'll tell you the 3 things that I think are important. So one is to acknowledge that the human self has a kind of intelligence, like the body's intelligence. Yeah. And lots of people just think that's all we are. So when we slip into this experience of us as a soul, we start to have a very different experience of ourselves. And that is not something to be scared of.
Yeah.
So that would be the first thing, is to just see that there is these 2 paths. And actually, I'm going to do it this way because it's very alchemical, and we'll cover that maybe in another video. But to come from this perspective where we actually get to inform our lives from this higher perspective, not from what we see here. Yeah. And this morning was a perfect example because my computer was blowing up, not in a good way. And I just went, that's fine. Let's just come up with another solution, right? And we looked for how else we could do it. Because while some people might go, oh, that's a sign we shouldn't be doing this. No, but that's just a low-level fear. Yeah, and spirit doesn't have that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is whatever you experience should just fit into a map, right? And if you have experiences and people are going, oh, that's your imagination, that's you're making things up, you're delusional, all of that. No, that just means that they're unwilling to stretch their box in order to find, the map that's going to fit, the map that's going to work. So I think that's the second thing is whatever you're experiencing, allow for the possibility that it is actually true. We live in an infinite universe. So that can just awaken us to finding aspects that we hadn't thought of before. And then the third thing is meditate.
Yeah.
Because I think a regular meditation will just allow you to shift into the spirit, allow you to stretch those boundaries of what you think. And down the track, I think I've got this notion that we need to talk about this thing about having 2,000 bits of information consciously per second, and whatever it is, 40 billion bits, anything from, I think, 30,000 to 40 billion, depending on who you listen to. And it's like that meditation will just allow you that sense of control and that sense of focus on what is real. And that's my 3 tips for today. You were going to share some books, yeah?
Yeah. So you do the tips and I'll do the books.
You.
So what I thought I'd share with people is books that have changed my life and been such an important part of my journey. And probably my book that gave me the big kick in a new direction was a book called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. And Michael Newton did 7,000 cases of research where he mapped the afterlife, where we go between incarnations. For somebody who, and it's over 20 years ago since I found this book, but for somebody who'd originally trained to become a past life regression therapist, this took everything to a whole extra level for me. I was in Borders Bookshop, if we all remember dear old Borders. It's now reincarnated into Amazon, I think, but something like that. But Borders used to have the coffee shop down there near where I lived down in Melbourne. And I went in there and I had a cup of coffee and I went to the bookshelf. I was looking for a book for somebody else. And I closed my eyes and pulled the book off the shelf. It was this one. And I read the back of it. And it just, something happened. And it was like the whole of the shop shook. And it felt like an earthquake, but something moved inside me that, if I didn't realize that it was quite a moment to find this book, then, I was given the physical experience to go with it. So from there, I found myself in America, got to know Michael, ended up working with him, ran his organization for him for over a decade around the world. And having got to know him, I can assure people that this guy's a real deal. He was a man of great wisdom, great humility, and great humor. He had a booming laugh and liked to use it. So, I would offer that book up because and we're talking about models today, that builds a whole model of the afterlife and puts why we come here into a different perspective than what I'd ever seen before. So that's my book for today, Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton.
Gorgeous. Love it. Love it. Okay. And I've got that digital form, but yes. Well, I think that's a good start. And let's come back next time and create a new video. And I've already got some ideas of what we're going to discuss that is going to take even this conversation to the new level. So
look forward to it, Mike. Good hanging out with you.
You too, Pete. Thanks.
All right. Take care, mate.